Hey there, what's happening? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Tim Warner here, and let's talk about generative AI and intellectual property. I've mentioned before on these YouTube videos that my 13-year-old daughter Zoe is responsible for my getting into generative AI. In fall of 2022, like kids are, especially adolescents, she was right on top of it when OpenAI first published their ChatGPT UI, the consumer SaaS app. And now it's really a specialty in my career. I'm making OpenAI courses for Pluralsight full-time, and I couldn't be happier. Anyway, the subject is, if you've noticed in the news recently over the last week or so, big authors, some of the biggest in the world like Jodi Picoult and George R.R. Martin, filed suit against OpenAI claiming copyright infringement in their GPT model in ChatGPT. For example, you could ask ChatGPT to give me a short story in the style of George R.R. Martin. Or maybe you could try in your prompt, make a system prompt, "You are George R.R. Martin, speak to me as such," this sort of thing. Also, artists, I have seen less citations on this, but several artists around the world are ticked off about OpenAI's DALL-E model. In fact, Zoe told me last night at dinner that I guess an artist, quote unquote artist, won a big ticket art contest, and it turns out that they just did it entirely through DALL-E with a good prompt. So what is my response to this notion of generative AI infringing on the intellectual property of content creators? Well, I feel especially qualified to remark on this because I am a content creator. I've been in publishing for over 20 years. I've written and published over a dozen books, contributed to dozens more, hundreds of e-learning courses. I've never tabulated them. When I was at Transcender, I contributed to all of their Microsoft, well, beyond Microsoft, certification practice exams. All of this is to say, I've had my work pirated my entire career, right from the very beginning. And in one sense, it's a compliment because you've got to have some level of profile, visibility, popularity, what have you, in order for people to be interested enough to pirate your stuff. On the other hand, the downside to piracy for the content creator is lost revenue. It's as simple as that. This is why I always find it absolutely ridiculous that those who defend piracy say knowledge is free or knowledge should be free. I don't know where they got that. But yeah, anyway, so you see a little bit where I'm coming from. Am I bitter about the fact that I'm pirated? Not that much. I don't know if it sounds like I am. I mean, it's annoying, of course, to think about those lost revenues. But, you know, it is what it is, to use a term that I've used elsewhere in this YouTube channel. What my top line response is to this question of generative AI and intellectual property, I mean, I am biased because I'm so pro generative AI, even though I'm a content creator. In fact, for a while, I haven't tested it, but for a while I've experimented with ChatGPT. Write this blog post on this subject in the voice of Tim Warner. And at least at one point, it was actually doing it, which was kind of a compliment that GPT, at least at that time, knew who I was and could emulate my style. But you see the problem. If somebody tries to pass off their work that was written in the style of Stephen King or George R.R. Martin, you're riding on their shoulders without giving them credit. You see, that's the thing. It's attribution. It's one thing for an artist to say, look, my biggest influences are George R.R. Martin. He deserves that credit. And then create original material. It's another to use generative AI to create original material. And again, it's important to remember that these OpenAI models like GPT and DALL-E are called generative AI because they're making net new content. It's generated content. It's not stolen, copy-pasted, lifted intellectual property. But the gray area at its kernel seems to be a lack of attribution. and the possibility of somebody being dishonest and claiming this as their work instead of giving due credit to the AI. So there's the gray. And again, let me come back to my defense. It's generative AI is one. Two, we're still early days. And I'm pretty sure if you were to talk to OpenAI candidly, they would agree that it's early days. There's a lot of gray that needs yet to be ironed out. And I believe it will eventually. But it's like any other huge paradigm shift in technology and in the world. It's disruptive. I hate to use cliche buzzwords like disruptive, but I can't think of a better example of a truly disruptive innovation than generative AI. Excuse me. All right, so what else is going on here? Yeah, I think that's the main point. The fact that we're in the gray, it's generative AI, it's not a direct copy lift. The issue, in my mind, is a question of false attribution and claiming credit for the AI's work. And then by extension, if you use the AI to create an image in the style of Keith Haring, for example, there's that. Now, do I think that the artists deserve remuneration because of this? Well, that again is a gray area. The one solidly negative / constructive criticism I have for OpenAI is that it seems clear over the last X years as they were training up their models that they took it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission approach to us content creators who have non-paywalled public content out in the wild. You see, that's something I tried to explain to Zoe last night. I said, these artists who are mad, who feel that DALL-E is capitalizing on their work, and certainly that's true, is that DALL-E, when OpenAI trained that model, it's not trying to get into paywall sites and trying to break into private or internal sites to scrape and build up its training set. It looked only at publicly available stuff. So this is material that the artists had out on display. Anyway, plenty of artists, of course, they want eyeballs on their work, so they're going to have public portfolio sites. And sure, those were vacuumed into the data set that's trained DALL-E. Just like with GPT, the public github.com repositories were all vacuumed in. Now, again, the problem there, as I see it now, is that we didn't know that this was happening. It just happened. And like it or not, your code in GitHub is part of GPT's intelligence. Like it or not, your public art portfolios are likely part of GPT and DALL-E's intelligence. Now, in the name of asking for forgiveness rather than permission, OpenAI gives us instructions on how we can block their GPT bot from scanning our public websites. Now, better late than never. Now you can formally opt out of having your art collected and so on. Now, the paid services at OpenAI are all guaranteed that any data you submit to it will not be used in their public training sets. So yeah, there's no question. That's kind of controversial. Now, is it understandable that OpenAI did that? Well, to the degree that their GPT model is proprietary, it's not open source. Remember that OpenAI has both nonprofit and for-profit arms, and they're competing in a capitalist economy. So, and they totally took the world by storm, and Google in particular was knocked back on their feet. And of course, they're trying to catch up with their Bard model, but they had all these other competitors have a disadvantage because OpenAI had been working in secret for so long. For years. So how could they rightly tell the public, hey, by the way, we're training the world's most intelligent conversational AI in the world, and we're going to use your data, whether you like it or not, to help train it up. Just to let you know, FYI. No, they're not going to do that. So from a capitalistic for-profit business perspective, sure, it makes sense. And again, remember, I know I'm repeating myself. Anything you put out on the public internet, you should assume is going to be taken. You should assume is going to be scraped. You should assume is going to be archived in perpetuity at Internet Archive, archive.org, So it's a sticky wicket. It's a sticky wicket. Part of me, The snarky part of me wonders if these authors like Martin and Picot are taking a get off my lawn, fuddy-duddy, old curmudgeon attitude towards this. And I wonder if I were to interview those authors in particular and give them a technical interview, how much understanding they have of any of the technical back ends and the meaning of generative AI. I have my opinion, but I guess I'll keep that to myself right now. I hope that this conversation made some semblance of sense for you. Thank you as always for your time and attention. I'll see you next time.